Russian forces spent months pushing a salient north of Lyman, reaching for a city that anchors the road to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Now, their own commanders can't fully say which roads inside that salient are still safe to drive. A position built to threaten a city has quietly turned into a corridor Russia now has to defend just to keep its own troops fed. Tonight's story is about a shape on the map, a narrow salient north of Lyman, and how a piece of ground built for offense can turn into a liability the moment the only way in becomes the only way out too. Welcome back. Let's start with the geography, because the shape of this position is the whole story. For months, Russian forces pushed into the area north of Lyman, building a salient, a bulge of territory extending into Ukrainian-held ground, connected back to the main Russian line by a single narrow neck. Reporting through the spring described Russian advances reaching the edges of settlements like Drobyshev and pressing toward the northern approaches of Lyman itself. By this summer, that momentum had reversed. Ukrainian forces began tightening the position from both sides, targeting the settlements that protect the salient's connection to the rest of the Russian-held front. A village-by-village fight around Shandryholove and Kodyazi on the western side of the corridor, and pressure building from the east toward Yarova, deeper inside the bulge. A salient like this one is easy to draw on a map and much harder to actually hold, because every kilometer of extra territory gained at the tip comes with an extra kilometer of exposed flank on both sides that has to be defended, patrolled, and kept supplied, all the way back to wherever the neck actually sits. Independent battlefield trackers following this sector described exactly this reversal taking hold by early summer. Ukrainian gains north of Lyman running ahead of what most public maps were showing, with Russian social media posts describing towns as contested that had previously been marked as firmly held. Posts that reportedly got deleted shortly after being noticed. That detail is worth sitting with on its own. A soldier or local resident posting that a supposedly secure town has come under contest, and that post disappearing soon after, is exactly the kind of small signal that tends to surface before an official map catches up to what's actually happening on the ground. Here's why the shape of this position matters more than any single village inside it. A salient only works as long as its neck stays wide enough to move supplies, reinforcements, and, if it ever comes to that, a withdrawal through it safely. Squeeze that neck from both sides at once, and every unit stationed deeper inside the bulge becomes hostage to a single corridor that keeps getting narrower. It doesn't matter how many troops Russia has forward near Yarova if the road connecting them back to the rest of the front is under fire from two directions at once. This is a basic problem armies have faced for as long as salients have existed. The further forward a position pushes, the more its actual combat power comes to depend not on how many soldiers are at the tip, but on how reliably supplies can still reach them through a shrinking gap behind. Military history is full of examples where a forward bulge looked like an advantage right up until the moment its defenders realized the neck behind them had become the actual battle, and everything happening at the tip was secondary to whether that neck would hold. Russia's own response to the pressure has been to push forward rather than to reinforce the neck. Reports describe Russian units advancing north of Serednia toward Kharkivka, an attempt to widen the corridor and improve the connection to the forward grouping. That move bought some breathing room, but it didn't resolve the core problem, because Ukrainian forces were already pressing the routes behind Yarova that connect the forward troops back to the rest of the line. Widening the neck slightly on one axis doesn't help much if the other axis is simultaneously being pinched harder. Russian military analysts themselves have reportedly acknowledged the danger, describing the northern flank around Lyman as increasingly hazardous, and warning it could create major problems for the wider grouping. Part of what they describe as a battlefield that's become genuinely difficult to control. Dispersed positions, dense forest cover, and small infiltrating groups moving through terrain that makes it hard for any command post to say with confidence which roads are actually secure on a given day. That's not a minor administrative headache. In a salient that depends entirely on knowing which routes are safe to move supplies through, losing confidence in your own map is close to losing the position itself, even before a single additional village changes hands. When commanders can no longer trust their own situational picture, every convoy sent down a road that was safe yesterday becomes a genuine gamble rather than a routine resupply run. And that uncertainty alone starts costing vehicles and lives long before any single battle for a named village is even fought. And the concerning part from Russia's own side isn't confined to the salient. Analysts have reportedly warned that problems in this specific sector risk spilling into neighboring axes, meaning a collapse here wouldn't just cost Russia the ground inside the bulge, it could destabilize the positions on either side of it that were counting on this salient to anchor their own flank. Despite those warnings, Russian command has reportedly continued sending additional troops toward Yarova, deeper into the threatened salient, rather than reinforcing the neck itself around Kodyazi and Shandryholove, where Ukrainian pressure is actually concentrated. That's the decision worth sitting with. Every additional unit sent forward becomes one more unit dependent on a corridor Ukraine is actively working to constrict. It's reinforcing the part of the trap that's already sprung, rather than the hinge that determines whether the trap closes at all. The results of that choice are already visible. Russian troops have reportedly been pushed out of or withdrawn from positions around Yarova, and infiltration routes that had been used to probe toward areas further along the salient have reportedly been abandoned. Neither of those outcomes suggests the reinforcement effort succeeded at securing the forward positions it was meant to protect. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been improving its position on multiple fronts at once, not just around the salient's neck. Inside Lyman itself, clearing operations reportedly retook the city's hospital and reduced Russian control in parts of the urban area. A building-by-building fight inside a city Russia has spent the better part of a year trying to threaten from the outside, now increasingly contested from within its own streets. South of the city, Ukrainian troops reportedly expanded from Ozern toward Drobyshev, adding pressure on the southern approaches at the same time the northern salient is being squeezed. None of these fronts operate in isolation. Pressure on one forces Russia to choose which sector gets whatever reserves are actually available, and there usually aren't enough reserves to answer every front at once. None of this means the salient collapses on a specific date, or that Russia can't stabilize the neck with enough additional effort. Salients have held under worse pressure before, and abandoning ground voluntarily is a decision commanders resist making until the alternative looks genuinely worse. But look at the actual choice Russia is currently facing. Withdraw from the salient, and Russia gives up the forward positions around Yarova and Serednia, shortening the line Ukraine has to contain north of the city. A real loss, but a controlled one. Keep pushing troops forward instead, and every unit added deepens Russia's exposure the moment that corridor narrows past the point where a fighting withdrawal is still possible. A position built to threaten a city has become a corridor Russia now has to defend just to keep its own forward troops supplied. Every unit sent deeper into it makes the eventual retreat, if one comes, more expensive than it would have been the week before. And every week that passes without reinforcing the neck itself is another week the price of that eventual retreat keeps climbing. If Russia keeps reinforcing the tip of a salient instead of the neck holding it together, is that still a plan to take Lyman? Or is it just a slower, more expensive way of deciding exactly how many troops get trapped when the corridor finally closes?